Now, the first thing I'd like to do is offer a quick apology. It's been a couple weeks since I put up a poll and did a Let's Talk Some Star Wars video, but with the holidays now officially over, my schedule should go back to normal, which means I'll hopefully be able to again get one of these up every weekend. Anyway, the question we left off on was, which was the best love story or couple in all of Star Wars? And probably to no one's surprise, Han and Leia took the top spot, capturing just under half of the total votes. And second was Anakin and Padme, and I was a little surprised they didn't get more than 20%. I thought there might be a little more love, no pun intended, for the prequel couple. Revan and Bastila then came in third with 15%, while Luke and Mara Jade finished in fourth with 11%. And not too many people thought a potential Rey and Kylo romantic ending to the sequel trilogy would compare with any of the previous love stories, as they grabbed only 4% of the vote. Though, as usual, I'll give the disclaimer that a different channel, and I know some out there are very, very pro Reylo, for example, might get very different results. Though it seems I myself may have gotten some very different results with this poll if I'd followed the advice of the top-rated comment, which came to us from Malay Derek, who asked, "What about Obi and Satine?" And yes, I agree, especially looking at it in hindsight, that they should have been a part of this poll, and maybe over Kylo and Rey. Though then the top-rated comment might have been, "What about Rey and Kylo?" Or maybe it wouldn't have been, who knows. Anyway, touching on Obi-Wan and Satine briefly, yes, I did highly enjoy their love story in the Clone Wars animated series. I thought showing that side of Obi-Wan very much humanized his character. And I've always found it a bit ironic that the perfect Jedi, in theory, is one that never gives in to their emotions and refrains from all attachment and always strives to do the right thing. All traits that tend to make for pretty boring characters in most cases. And probably the most interesting aspect of a Jedi, in terms of watching their stories at least, is their struggle to become or stay a Jedi, to hold to these difficult ideals that they do have to keep to, and to never give in or fall to the dark side. And that's kind of where I think they missed the mark with Anakin, and why his love story with Padme doesn't rival Han and Leia's more. There was no reluctance on Anakin's part. Episode 2 was just all about him pursuing her with no thought at all about any possible consequences. And yeah, that can work too. A story about someone who simply will not give up and constantly pursues the one they desire almost recklessly can work and be romantic if done right. But in this case, Anakin is so into her that we're left wondering, why doesn't he just leave the Jedi Order for her? Why try and keep this whole thing a secret when she confesses she loves him too? And sure, maybe it's because he doesn't want to give up on the chance to become powerful. Maybe it's because the Clone Wars have started and he feels obligated to fight in them now. These things do seem to be hinted at. However, it's made abundantly clear in Episode 2 that he's more concerned about her than anything else. So why stay a Jedi? What's truly keeping him there? Even Obi-Wan admits to Satine at one point that he would have left the Jedi Order had she asked him to, implying this is likely something that happens from time to time. And I'd have to imagine that, looking at it logically, it's not really that uncommon for Padawans to leave the Order when they come of age and realize, you know what, I don't want to give up possessive love for the rest of my life. And lastly here on Satine and Obi-Wan, before I spend the whole video on them instead of just touching on them like I said I was going to, I think Obi-Wan having once known love himself may help explain why he turned a blind eye to Anakin and Padme, because he almost certainly had to know something was going on between those two. He likely didn't know they were married, but he had to know how much they loved each other, the same way Ahsoka was aware of their love for each other too. Okay, moving on now to a comment from Jackson Mordente, who voted for Revan and Bastila and said the following. I think it's clearly this one for the ones that are familiar with the story. The entire story talks about redemption, and if people can be saved, and many attempts to redeem people in this story using traditional means of the Jedi rarely work, and that includes Bastila when she falls. The only reason she comes back to the light is because Revan utters the simple phrase, I love you, not because of some code or obligation to the light. I could go on and on about why this is the best love story in all of Star Wars, but this is the main reason. And I too could go on and on for a while arguing about why Revan and Bastila could be considered the best love story in all of Star Wars, but I'm not going to do that here, because for some time now I've been meaning to make a series of videos about Knights of the Old Republic, but just haven't gotten around to it yet. And yeah, that may have something to do with the fact I spent the previous year mostly complaining about The Last Jedi. So in other words, I blame Rian Johnson for not having done that yet. And I'm of course kidding. Kinda. Moving on then to Luke and Mara Jade. And again, I'm not really going to spend time on it here. Maybe I'll do a video on it in the future if that's something you'd like to see, but for now, there were plenty of people who had some great reasons as to why their love story is the best, and I invite you to pause the video and read some of them now. Which then brings us to our main showdown, Han and Leia vs. Anakin and Padme. And honestly here, I think Han and Leia was just handled better. It felt more natural, and I probably enjoy it more than Anakin and Padme. But I wish I could put those two at the top, since it's really meant to be the whole backbone of the Star Wars saga. It's why Anakin fell to the dark side and why his son would ultimately need to redeem him. And this brings us to a comment from Cosmin Dash, who said, "Across the Stars comes to my mind while also thinking that the whole prequel trilogy is a tragic love and war story. Their story is not as simple and rough as Han and Leia's. It is romantic, ideal, a space opera. It feels like a poem. It's not vulgar. It is elegant and noble. I can say that it is my favorite couple and love story from all the movies, well, that I've seen so far." And again, I wish that's exactly how I felt about it. I wish it had that much power, because it would only make the overall story of Star Wars that much better, that much more moving and emotional, especially when Anakin returns to the light at the end to save his son. And I think it's clear Lucas wanted the story of Anakin and Padme to be something like a modern-day Romeo and Juliet. He wanted this to be timeless, a tragic love story that broke our hearts in the end. And this is something I've touched on before in other videos, that even with some of the flaws, the prequels could have been so much better if we spent the whole time absolutely dreading the fact that Anakin would eventually fall to the dark side and become Vader, because we were so invested in his relationship with Padme, because we cared so much about the two of them. Instead, so many people were just like, when's he going to become Vader and slaughter the Jedi already? And I personally feel Attack of the Clones could have been a much better movie if Anakin basically spends the entire story conflicted, that we're shown, not told, that he does have strong feelings for her, and she for him, but he keeps trying to deny them because he takes his responsibility of being a Jedi extremely seriously. It is, after all, what he's always wanted to be, according to what he said in Episode 1. And only in the end, when they think they're about to die in the arena, do they confess their feelings for each other. Instead, Anakin spends the entire movie literally telling Padme, and us the audience, how much he loves her. It's never really shown to us, and she keeps saying that she can't love him back for reasons, I guess, because I have no idea why she as a senator would be prohibited from falling in love. I get that she maybe is denying her love for Anakin for his sake, but there are times she implies it would be detrimental to her for some reason, and I really can't figure out why. And yeah, as I said earlier, you can certainly make a good love story out of one side relentlessly chasing the other, but if done wrong, the pursuer can just come off feeling like a creepy stalker. I'm not saying that's the case with Anakin per se, but as Force Maximus 84 points out, his dialogue is pretty bad. However, as Padawan of Christ begins to allude to in their comment, of course Anakin was going to come off sounding a bit awkward. He was a teenager. This was the first time he'd ever flirted with someone before. So yeah, it's no surprise he was going to go way over the top with his flattery. Of course he was most likely going to make a fool of himself. Nevertheless, it comes off even more awkward than it needed to. Thankfully though, as Willie Howell points out in his comment, the relationship of Anakin and Padme was made better thanks in large part to the Clone Wars animated series. Not to mention, the chemistry between them was much better in Revenge of the Sith than it was in Attack of the Clones. And now let's move on to a comment from Sheldon Cooper, who said, "Anakin and Padme fell for each other despite their limitations. They knew that there were restrictions on the relationship, which was painful, but they felt it was worthwhile. The relationship could have worked if Anakin had more patience and discipline, or chose to leave the Jedi Council, come clean about his marriage. Most importantly, Shmi Skywalker and Qui-Gon in Anakin's life could have given Anakin the guidance he needed. By the way, Han and Leia, we have very little information on them, and they didn't stick it out." First, I do feel it's very unfortunate how they chose to have Han and Leia's story end, but setting that aside, I do like and agree with a lot of what Sheldon is saying here. I think obviously under different circumstances, the story of Anakin and Padme ends much differently, but they did in many ways bring out the best in each other, and that's what love really should be, two individuals coming together to make a greater whole, until of course Padme, through no fault of her own, ultimately brought out the absolute worst in Anakin, hence the tragedy of the whole thing. However, I do think people bringing out the best in each other was much better showcased by the relationship of Han and Leia in the original trilogy. In fact, I think that's why the relationship was so great. They truly do become better people because of each other, and Han's pursuit of Leia is much more subtle, not to mention would likely be much more effective than Anakin's aggressive direct approach. In fact, everything about the way we watch Han and Leia fall in love, not are told they're falling in love, is believable and natural. And when Leia finally confesses to Han that she loves him by basically blurting it out moments before he's frozen in carbonite, and he just says back, "I know," well, that's arguably one of the best moments in the history of film, and encapsulates these two characters and their relationship with each other perfectly up until that point. 3 words spoken by Leia and 2 returned by Han say so much more than Padme rambling on and on about how she truly, deeply, madly loves Anakin before they're carted off into the arena. In closing here, I don't want to bash the story of Anakin and Padme. I do enjoy it, and I do enjoy the prequels, and I'm going to put up a rather long yet well thought out comment from someone I'll just call Pi that you're again encouraged to pause and read, expressing why they feel it was so great. But I do think we can all agree it could have been executed better, and that if it had been, more people would be willing to put the prequels alongside the original trilogy in terms of quality. Because I do love the idea that behind Vader is a truly tragic love story, that so much hate could come only from someone who'd once known so much love. It's poetic, fairy tale-like even, and it rhymes as George Lucas himself might say. But for roughly half the people who voted in this poll, it doesn't top the somehow more genuine and grounded tale of a rogue and princess falling in love with each other. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of what I or anyone else had to say in this video, or to offer up suggestions for future questions of the week. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.